The house by the coast only revealed itself when the tide was low. At high tide, the road vanished beneath the water, leaving the place alone, cut off from the mainland by a shallow, breathing sea. You arrived just before dusk, the sky dimming into a soft gray blue, the kind of light that made time feel slower than usual. The air smelled faintly of salt and wet stone. Somewhere far out, a boy rang once, then went quiet again. The house had been empty for years. That was what the letter said. No return address. Just your name, written neatly, and a single sentence asking you to come before the next full moon. You didn't feel afraid. Only curious. And strangely calm. Inside, the air was cool and still. Dust lay undisturbed on the shelves, but the furniture remained arranged, as if someone had only stepped out for a moment. A clock ticked slowly in the next room, steady and patient. You set your bag down and walked to the window. The sea was retreating, water sliding away from the land in long, quiet breaths. With each minute, more of the shoreline appeared, smooth stones, dark seaweed, the pale shapes of shells. There was a sense that the house had been waiting. In the study, you found a small wooden box resting on the desk. Inside were several notebooks, their pages filled with careful handwriting. Dates stretched back decades. The entries were calm, observational, almost meditative. Notes about the tides, the weather, the sound of footsteps in empty rooms. One line appeared again and again. The house remembers what we forget. As night settled in, the wind rose gently, brushing the windows without urgency. You felt no need to read further. There would be time. For now, you lit a small lamp and sat quietly, listening to the clock, the distant water, the slow rhythm of a place that seemed to exist slightly outside the present. When you finally lay down, the bed was unexpectedly comfortable. The ceiling above you creaked softly, adjusting to the cooling air. Somewhere below, the house sighed, wood, stone, and memory settling together. Sleep came easily, carried on the sound of the sea moving away. You woke sometime in the night, not startled, just aware. The room was dim, the lamp still glowing softly. For a moment, you weren't sure what had pulled you from sleep. Then you heard it. Footsteps. Not loud. Not hurried. Just the gentle sound of movement in another part of the house. Slow, deliberate, as if someone were walking carefully, mindful not to wake anyone. You stayed still, listening. The footsteps passed the study, paused, then continued toward the kitchen. There was no sense of danger in them. If anything, they felt familiar, like a memory replaying itself rather than something happening now. Eventually, the sound faded. The clock continued ticking, unconcerned. In the morning, you explored the house more thoroughly. Everything was exactly where it should be. No signs of intrusion. No doors open that hadn't been before. Only the notebooks remained, waiting. One entry caught your attention. Sometimes the house walks at night. It doesn't go far. It just checks that everything is still here. You smiled faintly, unsure why. Outside, the tide was high again, water pressing close to the foundation. The world felt suspended, neither fully isolated nor connected. You made tea and sat near the window, watching the surface of the sea ripple under a pale sky. Later, you found another notebook, thinner than the rest. This one held only a few pages. The final entry was brief. If someone comes, they won't need instructions. The house will tell them what to do. That evening, as the light softened and the tide withdrew once more, you felt an urge to walk along the exposed shoreline. The stones were cool beneath your feet. The air carried a low, steady hush. Half buried near the waterline, you noticed something pale, a marker stone, smooth and rounded, etched with the outline of the house itself. You brushed sand away and felt a faint warmth beneath your fingers. Behind you, the house stood quietly watching. When you returned inside, the sense of being alone had shifted. Not replaced by company, just altered, as if the space itself had become more attentive. That night the footsteps returned. Closer this time. Softer. And when you drifted back to sleep, you dreamed not of strangers, but of rooms remembering their purpose. The third night was the longest. Not because anything happened, but because time seemed to stretch, thinning like mist. Hours passed without weight. You lay awake, not restless, just drifting in and out of awareness. The house made its quiet sounds. A beam settling. A distant creak. The steady rhythm of the clock. At some point, you sensed movement again. Not footsteps this time, more like a presence shifting, adjusting, as if the house itself were turning over in sleep. You didn't open your eyes. In the half-dream state, images surfaced gently. People sitting at the same window decades apart. Hands writing in notebooks. Someone standing where you stood now, listening to the tide the same way. None of it felt urgent. It felt complete. Near dawn, the sound of water changed. The tide was coming in earlier than expected. You rose and looked outside as the sea crept closer, reclaiming the road, sealing the house off once more. That was when you understood. The mystery wasn't about who had lived here, but why the house remained. It wasn't abandoned. It was preserved. Held in place as a kind of anchor, a pause between moments. A place where nothing needed to happen. The notebooks weren't warnings. They were invitations. As light returned to the sky, you felt deeply rested, as if you had slept far longer than you had. The air seemed lighter. The house quieter, satisfied. You packed your bag slowly. There was no rush. When the tide fell again, you left the marker stone uncovered, exactly where it belonged. Before closing the door, you paused. The clock stopped ticking. Not abruptly, it simply finished a cycle and rested. You left the house at dawn, not because you felt finished, but because the tide told you it was time. The water had already begun to pull away again, exposing the narrow road in long, quiet stretches. The air was cool and pale, carrying the faint scent of salt and wet stone. As you walked, the house stayed behind you, silent, patient, unchanged. It did not feel like something you were abandoning. It felt like something that would always be exactly where it needed to be. The road curved gently along the shore. With each step, the sounds of the house faded, replaced by the soft hush of the sea settling into its next rhythm. Gulls drifted overhead without calling. The world felt paused, as if holding a breath. By the time you reached the mainland, the light had fully arrived. Ordinary sounds returned, distant engines, wind through grass, the subtle movement of a waking day. Yet something within you remained slow, anchored to the calm you had carried out of the house. That night in your own bed, you noticed the difference immediately. The silence felt deeper, more spacious. When you closed your eyes, your thoughts didn't rush forward as they usually did. They moved gently, like water sliding over smooth stone. You dreamed of corridors you had never walked, yet somehow recognized. Of rooms lit by lamps that glowed without flicker. Of windows open to the sound of water breathing in and out. In the dream, the house did not appear as a place, but as a sensation, steady, observant, unhurried. Over the following days, small moments returned to you unexpectedly. The weight of the air just before rain. The comfort of a ticking clock in an empty room. The feeling of being present without needing to act. Sometimes, just before sleep, you thought you heard footsteps again. Not in your home, not really, but somewhere deeper, farther away. They never approached. They simply passed, slow and careful, as if checking that everything was still where it belonged. And then they would fade. You understood then that the house had not asked you to remember it. It had only offered you something to carry forward, the knowledge that rest did not have to be earned, that stillness could exist without explanation. Far away at low tide, the house continued to wait. Not empty, not occupied, simply present. And as sleep finally took you, gently and without effort, your breathing slowed, your thoughts softened, and the world became quiet enough to hold you.